before me. Beauty behind, above, below, around, all around. Beauty within you. Beauty in me. Above, below, around, all around.
The New Community Project had its beginning in the year 2003, 20 years ago, with the idea of bringing change to a world seeking change. It continues to be a small nonprofit with a big goal of changing the world. Hello, this is Brent Carlson. Welcome to Brethren Voices. Live and in person, we have David Radcliff with us today, Director of the New Community Project. David, it's great to have you with us.
Brent, it's great to be back, as
Again,
always.
I was trying to count how many times we've had you on the show, and I lost track. But it's
Not enough. That's all I can say.
Not enough. On February 9th, a little over a year ago, we met on Zoom. Now you come to us following a learning tour in Yellowstone National Park. So welcome. It's nice to have you come straight from Yellowstone with your backpack and all those other things.
I'm wearing my hiking boots at the moment, yes.
I saw that, actually. Can you tell us how you're related to the Church of the Brethren? Did you grow up Brethren? Did you go to Brethren churches? What's your Brethren history?
Yes, I am Brethren through and through. On my dad's side, go back a couple of generations down in Southwest Virginia. And I grew up in the Blue Ridge Church of the Brethren in Verlina District, about 10 miles east of Roanoke. And then I got the idea by the time I was a junior in high school that I should be a pastor, and went on to Bridgewater College, philosophy and religion degree, graduated from there, then straight to Bethany Seminary, where I got a master's of divinity and eventually a doctorate of ministries from Bethany in peace studies. But yeah, that was my track, and pastored for 10 years and went to Central America toward the end of that period. Had my life changed there by the things I saw and experienced, and then soon after that got hired by the National Office of the Church of the Brethren to direct the peace programs. That would have been in 1989.
You are Brethren through and through.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Well, tell us about the Director of Brethren Witness, and what did that involve in Elgin?
For 15 years I worked for the General Board, called the General Board back then, of the Church of the Brethren. And I was overseeing the peace programs, environmental programs, and also the Global Food Crisis Fund. So it was a very interesting and engaging life that I had, and did a lot of traveling around the country, talking to youth groups and to congregations and conferences of various kinds. And then also began learning what we eventually called their faith expeditions, taking groups, because I'd had that kind of transformative experience myself in Central America, and I knew what impact that kind of thing could have on a person. And so I began organizing these trips from the office there in Elgin, probably first just called them work camps, but then upgraded that a little, called them faith expeditions, and then carried that on until I ended my work there in 2003.
And then you transitioned into New Community Project and have expanded more as well.
Yes, and expand is a good way to see it, because we were I and our organization were sort of free to roam. And when you're working with the Church of the Brethren, of course, you're focused on Brethren communities, Brethren churches, Brethren youth, all these things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I understand how that works. But with NCP, I could then spend a lot more time in all kinds of schools, all kinds of colleges. We also didn't have the religious baggage, you might say, of coming from a church. Mm. So colleges and schools are less reluctant to have you in because you're not coming with that as possible agenda. So yes, and then also we had license to roam, you might say, in terms of developing partnerships around the world. That sort of flowed out of a variety of circumstances how those got developed. But there wasn't any overarching mission board or anybody else to sort of direct us in certain ways, or we had to seek approval from, so we could go ahead and do the things where we felt led, I guess you could say.
And that lead has really expanded into learning tours all over the world. I want to mention a few and just describe in a line or two your reactions or your experience with those places. So the first one I have is Nepal.
Exhilarating and excruciating. I mean, exhilarating for the Himalaya, exhilarating for the colors of the culture and all these things and the people you meet there. Excruciating because we're deeply involved with an organization there that's working to combat human trafficking, and we do some programs to work with them through that.
And that's a very difficult situation, and it's probably pervasive in the area.
It is.
And it's a big job to try to do something about it.
Well, unfortunately, as in all the places where we do programs abroad, there's a partner group that really knows the lay of the land, knows their culture, knows their people, and they're the ones carrying out the programs. We're just trying to put wind in their sails. Okay. It would be impossible for us to go and try to do anything meaningful in those contexts. But we've been really fortunate to have tremendous partnerships who we provide the resources, they provide the expertise and the programmatic initiative.
I want to just ask a question kind of off the track here, but I've heard some people in Nepal and other places, third world, are so poor that the parents can't take care of the children, and so they'll actually sell their children or give their children to some organization thinking they're going to educate them and take care of them, and that's actually a front for human trafficking.
It sure is. It sure is. There's so many places, especially in the perimeter areas of a place like Nepal. Not maybe some in Kathmandu, the main city or two, but also out beyond in the country areas, the hill areas, where people are desperate for their children. Well, first of all, it's hard for them to even provide for their children. They don't have the resources, and they're also grasping at any opportunity that seems to present itself. And so when somebody says, I can provide your daughter, let's say your daughter, because this is often young women that we're working with, and our partner is, we'll have a job for your daughter down in India, or I have a position opened up in Dubai, or wherever it may be, and they show them pictures of what's going to be like for them, how much money they're going to be sending home, and it's very hard for these families to resist that. Mm-hmm. And the young women may feel like, well, it's a dead end where I'm living in this little rural community, I don't have many options here. And so they also kind of jump at the chance to do that. And I'm just going to say there's no pot of gold at the end of that rainbow.
And it's a fraudulent front.
It is. And it's increasing, actually, Brent. Since we're on Nepal, when we were going there, when we first started, my first trip there was in 2005. We began working there in 2007 or so. And we worked with this current organization for about 10 years now. They were telling us, 5, 6, 8 years ago, 10 to 15,000 girls were being trafficked a year, girls and women. Now they tell us 40,000.
Oh, no.
The new factor is social media.
Oh, my goodness.
Because you don't have to have someone come to your village now and try to convince you to go and show you the pictures and whatever. You can find these things online, the opportunities that seem to present themselves. And, of course, these young people, they fall for that and may not even need their parents' involvement. I mean, they can get away from there and go there and become immersed in that suddenly, and then with unforeseen consequences.
Yeah. Wow. Let's talk about Ecuadorian Amazon.
Oh, my golly. Oh, the beauty and diversity and the troubles, really. Of course, you see all manner of life bursting forth, really, from the rainforest. Whether it's plant life, animal life, sea life, whatever it may be, it's just amazing. And then, of course, you've got the impacts of oil production, palm oil plantations, gold mining, colonists coming in and taking over lands. So, you're seeing the beauty and the beast in a place like Ecuador.
South Sudan.
Poignant. I mean, I've been going there. I started going there when I was with the Church of the Brethren at the General Board office, I think maybe 1993.
And South Sudan has been a mission target for a long time.
It has, for the Church of the Brethren for a long time. And of course, it wasn't South Sudan then, it was part of Sudan.
Yes.
We would go to the southern part of Sudan and other Church of the Brethren people as well. But I started going there then, and I've, of course, met lots of refugees over the years, lots of women that have been traumatized by conflict and by having to flee their lands, lots of environmental destruction because of warfare as well as just poverty. And so, yeah, it's one of those places in the world, but it's also a place where you go and you meet women in a refugee camp and they're telling you all the struggles that they face. And then they say, but we have not lost our faith in God. Mm-hmm. And I want to just take people who say, well, if those people over there just had more faith, I'd like to take them there and let them meet that woman in the refugee camp who had that to say. Yeah. So it's both, it both drags you down and lifts you up in a place like South Sudan.
Arctic Village, Alaska.
Wow, the ends of the earth is what comes right to mind. They say the most remote human settlement in the northern hemisphere, Arctic Village, 150 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And I know you've been there. It's our friends who welcome us there. This is actually was our 20th anniversary of going there last summer when we were there. We first went there in 2002. And so just to learn about the Gwich'in, their ways of life, the foods they eat, the stories they tell. And, you know, I've said to a couple people lately, you know, there's some people who talk on and on, probably like me, who you get tired of very quickly. But then you meet somebody like Charlie Sweeney, the master hunter, our friend and guide, advocate for the environment around them. He can talk for hours around the campfire. You never seem to tire of it. So, yeah, so we go there to learn the lore and also to see how our actions here in the lower 48 impact oil drilling prospects up on the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which the Gwich'in are very concerned about. So we try to learn about those things, but also just to soak in life in the foothills of the Brooks Range with the Gwich'in.
Well, as I recall, Charlie and the people in the village said their community has existed in that place for 8,000 to 10,000 years, and they want to keep that lifestyle. Yeah. And that's the challenge because it's being impinged upon by the changes that are going on. But they're happy and they're peaceful and they love their land, they love their children, and they want to keep that culture and that way of life.
And I will say they too are affected by social media. I hear this from all the Native communities we work with, trying to find young people who want to learn these things, the traditional ways, the cultural things, all these things. It's very challenging because there's so many distractions, even for their own kids and grandkids. So no place is kind of immune to some of these currents that we're facing in modern life, but you hope that their grounding is deep enough that these youth will eventually see its value and follow to the path.
I understand the New Community Project has a lot of other projects, and learning tours are not the main focus really of the whole New Community Project, but it is something that's kind of intriguing, and it is something that allows people to go places they'd never have a chance to go otherwise. Because most of these places are not hotels, there's no roads to get there, there's not a place that like a tourist office or something like that. It's people to people, and you have developed relationships with people who host small groups and give them an experience of what it's like to be there as a native living person.
Well, and it's people to people and people to nature. So we do both. The different trips have different foci. Most of them have some of both of those. Denali's one that's pretty much us and nature, you might say. Yellowstone, the Tetons, where I just was, pretty much us and nature. All the others, though, have a very strong human dynamic involved in the interchange. I consider the learning tour sort of like synapses. Those, I don't even know what a synapse is, but in your body, so things that kind of connect things up. That's how I see them. It connects us to people and realities and nature in other parts of the world in a way that's deeper than your typical tourist trip or mission trip or service trip or those kinds of things. And the goal of the trips is to help us see our world in a different way, see ourselves in a different way, and then to see where that takes us, where God may lead us from that interchange that we've just had.
And to develop a relationship with people that you never have another opportunity to meet.
Yes. Within the group, I often find people on Facebook when they're posting things, it's learning tour friends of theirs that they've had who are the first ones to affirm whatever they're posting or whatever, or express a comment or something like that. So it develops lasting communities, really, within the group, and then also, of course, with the people that you're engaging. Like when we go to Myanmar, we have the people welcoming us like long-lost family members in the communities down in the Delta. So it's both the richness of that interchange and the richness of, you know, the group that we are together coming from the U.S. and sometimes from other countries, but typically the U.S. that sort of gives these the depth and the richness that you're hoping for in experiences like this.
Well, let's talk about some of the other things on the New Community Project website. One of them is education, and one of them is developing information and sensitivity to what's going on in the earth. You, in that prospect or perspective of education, you actually have classes that you teach for elementary, high school, college students?
Well, okay, that's depends on how you mean classes that I teach. I visit loads of elementary and high school and college groups. I'm not teaching. I'm going as a presenter.
Okay, you're not teaching the course, but you're presenting to the class.
I do teach courses at Elizabethtown College.
Okay.
That's a normal faculty kind of role with the adult ed department. But in my normal course of my work, yes, I'm visiting schools, colleges, and congregations, whoever will let me in the door, frankly. And I do probably 100 presentations a year. Wow. In those kinds of settings. Now that means on a given day I might do 5 at a high school. I'm counting that toward the 100. Okay. But yeah, and that's been very fertile ground. I mean, I found the young people are ready to soak up this information. They know things aren't right here. They intuit that things aren't right here. Until you got to turn your social media on for a few minutes and you're going to find a new flood someplace or a new drought somewhere. Or, child workers making the cobalt for our cell phones. Yeah. And kids they don't think that's right. Yeah. And so we're trying to tap into their energy and their anger and their passion and their idealism to get them to just offer them more information and opportunities then to step forward on what they're learning.
It's interesting because when you talk that way, I think some people might hear it as the sky is falling, and then say, hey, the sky's always been falling. I've been hearing the same thing for 40 years. But when you're talking to students, for them, there's a better perspective and maybe a sense of urgency.
Yes.
And they realize this is not just some idea in the textbook. It's really happening because they can see it.
They can see it. And they haven't been hearing the mantra over decades. They're new to the game, so to speak. And frankly, the sky is falling. So that's the other thing they have going for them in terms of wanting to get on fire about stuff. We're facing tremendous turning points that we either going to turn to the wrong way or we're going to turn to the good way, and we have decisive moments coming ahead of us in the human family.
I heard that you have a framework that's kind of borrowed from 4-H, that what you kind of think about in terms of how you're doing these presentations.
It sort of summarizes our work at New Community Project, our modus operandi. Again, I don't even know what that means, but our method of operation. And so the 4 H's are head, heart, hands, and health. Well, we turn that around. We start with the heart. We think that change begins within, and that's what we call our experiential learning part of our program. Going on learning tours, seeing things you haven't seen before in a way you haven't seen them, going to our sustainable living centers, having an encounter there with beautiful things that are happening that also don't mask the troubles but are working at practical solutions. And you can get your hands in the soil and your hands in the creek, your hands in the garden, and get yourself very much involved that experientially. And that begins to affect you on the inner level. So that's and then my own traveling and talking and being in schools and other places where I'm showing my pictures and trying to engage the kids in that way experientially. Even though they didn't travel themselves, the show came to them. Then we have so heart, then head. So what's the information we need? Once we have the feelings inside, and the energy kind of ready to come out.
And the desire to do something.
Desire to do. What's the information that helps you frame that, helps you kind of understand it better, know what options you have, what the problems are, that sort of thing. So that would be, so heart, head, then we do hands. And hands means what's the follow through? What are the steps you can take? And so they can join us on a learning group. They can come and volunteer at the Sustainable Center. We try to provide through a monthly email to our young adult group, here are some things that are happening that you might be interested in, and to give people doors that they could walk through. And of course, we try to do that with adults and anybody who's within earshot or web shot or whatever you want to say about that. We try to give all people, to let them see what the challenges are we're facing, but then what are the opportunities that these challenges present for us to personally take action and also to inform others and to engage others in moving us all toward something better. No, and then final. So heart, head, hands, and the final one is health. And to me, that's the vision. In Christian terms, we say, what's the kingdom of God vision? What's that thing toward which we are hoping and longing and moving? Because, without hope, the people perish. We've got to have this vision of what we can achieve here, what we can accomplish here, how we can shift things in a way that'll get us to a better outcome. So heart, head, hands, health.
When you talk about health, I'm thinking that having a healthy planet, having a healthy lifestyle, having a healthy attitude. They all go together.
They sure do.
But you're also educating people in third world countries.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
some cross-cultural sharing between the United States students.
Yes.
And so tell us what kind of educational things you're doing in some of the other countries that you're working with.
Well, of course, the main thing we do is to help educate girls very practically. I mean, we have our Give a Girl a Chance fund. Every year, probably close to 1,000 girls around the world. I'm not sure. I should count this up someday. In fact, I'm going to count it up because it's our 20th anniversary, and we're going to put in the next newsletter the summary of how many girls we've educated over the years,
Good.
all those kinds of things. But we educate girls and provide them with whatever they need. I just heard this morning, actually, of needs for girls in a small community, mountain community in Nepal. They needed shoes because some of the girls in the school have shoes, others don't, and it kind of stigmatizes the ones that don't. And how do we? So anyway, how do you turn away from that? So we give girls the opportunity to get an education, which is so important, both for themselves and their self-esteem and their ability to succeed in life, for their communities, and what that's going to mean for another young woman who has the mental and intellectual wherewithal to step ahead into better jobs and better careers. Also, the more she's in school, the fewer children she's going to have. So that has less of an impact on her, frankly, and also on the environment. I mean, one of the critical things about combating climate change is to reduce population rates. And one of the best ways to do that is to keep girls in school. So for all those reasons and more, and also keeps girls out of the traffickers' hands. Because if parents see the girl as living a more purposeful life, maybe having an income stream in the future that she wouldn't have had if she hadn't been in school. So that's part of what we do. We also provide some cross-cultural opportunities. I mean, when I visit from one community to another, I try to tell, well, I was, just in South Sudan in May, I was telling people there they were having trouble with elephants in one of the plantations that we fund, tree plantations that we fund, reforestation campaigns. And so they were having
Elephants
trouble.
coming and trampling down.
Elephants were coming because they had some fruit trees around, and I was able to tell them about. I just read an article from the Maasai people in Kenya, who noticed that elephants didn't come and try to push over the trees that had honey in them, meaning there were bees. The elephants didn't like the bees. And so I told the friends in South Sudan what I'd learned from some article from Kenya and how you could even get a battery-operated little machine that makes bee sounds. But they also have beehives all around their community there. So I think they're going to try installing beehives and see what that does about the elephants. So we also are we've taken a couple of times someone from, let's talk about South-South interchange. So you and I, and many people listening perhaps, are northerners. I mean, we come from the north,
Yes.
the wealthier north.
Yes.
And the south-south, you're thinking about people in the equatorial regions who have a lot in common with each other but never get to talk to each other. And so we have begun bringing some of our partners from one country to visit partners in another country just so they can share notes, really, and learn from each other. And they have a whole different conversation. I mean, our friends are always happy to see us come with our learning tour groups, but they've also found a certain depth and richness out of someone from their part of the world coming to visit them that's not there when you and I go and visit. So we are trying to do things like that, yes.
So there's lots of partnership opportunities that are being developed. One of the things that's important is that you have a number of volunteers and people that are partnering with New Community Project in the United States. I heard 11,000.
Yeah, informally, that's about our network, about 11,000 people.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. Good for you. Gee, that's a lot of support.
Well, it is. Not all of them give us money or anything, which is okay with me. If they're in the loop, that's what we're looking for. And of course, we need financial support. But the ones who send that, we're very grateful. Those who don't, that's okay. They're getting the info, and they're living and learning with us as we share information with them. Yes.
You also, besides the countries I named, you're in some other countries too.
Yes.
Rwanda comes to mind,
Yes.
and the Congo and Malawi, and
Yes.
you mentioned Myanmar. What are you doing in those countries?
Wow. Well, it's generally helping girls get educated. Well, I mean, I say educating girls. It's our partners making all this happen, but facilitating girls' education, women's empowerment through skills training, microloans, adult literacy, gardening projects. Those would be some of the main ways we incapacitate women, and then reforestation. In fact, Brent, I was shocked, frankly, when we went to South Sudan back in May, and we have 3 reforestation projects going on there. Totally, they're going to plant about 60,000 trees this year.
Wow.
We have what we call a 2 million tree campaign. We started out calling it a million tree campaign. We set our sights too low. So over 10 years, we're hoping to plant 2 million trees. Well, so that means 200,000 a year. So in South Sudan alone, 60,000 trees. What we learned that surprised me when I was there is that we are the leading reforestation agent in that part of South Sudan, that whole region of South Sudan.
Really?
The government's not doing more, other NGOs aren't doing more. That's what our partners told us. And first of all, it was a little bit, cool to think you're the lead, but also very disheartening.
Yeah.
I mean, we're puny.
Yeah,
And
we're
60,000 trees, I mean, that's some significance, but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So, we take a little pride in that, but we also feel a little remorse.
Yeah. Well, and trees are so helpful to the environment in so many different ways.
So many different ways.
And of course, people who are starving and they need to cook and they're cutting down trees to do,
Well, our friends in Malawi, you mentioned Malawi. They're down to a meal a day. The 2 times I've visited there, families have been down to a meal a day because of climate change. Either too much rain or not enough rain, so they've turned to the available resource they have, which is the nearby forests and trees. They say the average family of 4 or 5 people in Malawi has to cut down an acre of trees per month to be able to make enough charcoal to feed their family.
And they sell the charcoal.
Sell the charcoal
and make
to
the
earn the
money.
money. Yes, to earn the money to feed their family. So you imagine every family having to have an acre of trees. That's rapacious deforestation.
Absolutely.
So we're planting trees in Malawi. So that's one part of our work. So the girls' stuff, the women's stuff, and the reforestation.
And people may wonder about charcoal, but charcoal is fairly easy to make, and you don't need a lot of resource to make it, and it's a valuable commodity that you can sell.
Yes.
So that's the people are kind of stuck. What are they going to do?
Yes. And there's demand.
David, it's wonderful as always to sit and talk to you.
A blessing and a pleasure, Brent. Thank you so
The
much.
pleasure is mine. For Brethren Voices, this is Brent Carlson.
And this is David Radcliff.
Wishing
you
you
peace.
Pass it on.
Beauty before me.